So, well, this is the first video of my channel, I think, in my YouTube channel. And here I am with my dear friend, Tony Young.
Good to see you. Sorry, left you hanging there.
And we're gonna have a little, debate about things we talk every day, but we never recorded them. So now it's the time.
Yes, usually maybe. This happens in a bar or a restaurant or somewhere else. So this time we've decided to actually record it.
Exactly.
Very good.
So, well, a lot of people know us, maybe, that people that is going to see this video, and they know that we were together. But on the last months or maybe a year, we have been doing music together. And Tony, with the role of the songwriter, and me helping with, the recording or producing or...
More than helping, doing some producing.
Okay. A little bit of everything, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's start. So my first question, we usually talk about this. What do you consider that is like a visionary in music? Somebody that maybe sees things that other people don't? And what are your favorite examples or something like that?
Yeah, so the key to that question is going to be, what is the definition of a visionary, right? To me, a visionary is somebody who moves, and if we're talking in the context of music, it's going to be somebody who moves the needle forward with music in some way that changes kind of the landscape of what came before, and then after them, suddenly the entire landscape has changed. I think the perfect example of somebody like that, from an instrument playing perspective, lyrics, songwriting, etc., has got to be Jimi Hendrix. He's one of the people that you immediately go, he completely transformed the way that people play electric guitar. In addition, so his playing was amazing. He came at the perfect time because of all the loud amplification and everything else, and he was able to get those really driven lead overtones that people were getting them, but the way he played in combination with that sound made it massive. And then add that to his songwriting, which is
singing.
And his singing as well, which he never thought. If you read interviews around, and even biographies,
he never thought about songwriting.
Well, no, not even that. He didn't think he was a very good songwriter. He didn't think his voice was very good. And you listen to some of those vocal tracks; they're beautiful.
Yeah, it's incredible. I had the privilege to listen to some of those in the Mix with the Master sessions, individual tracks, with Eddie Kramer, the person who recorded those records, explaining it, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And taking in account that it was done on one take or on a full take,
and then
live.
Usually relatively primitive. I mean, they were getting some decent consoles back then. They were moving into, I guess it was 12 track and 16 track and things like that, but it was only just starting. It was pretty primitive stuff that they were doing, but they were getting some great sounds.
And with the gear they had, which obviously for the time it was amazing, but it gave you just the opportunity to capture the truth. If you were good, it was good.
Yeah.
Any mistakes would be captured. And some of those songs, when the Wind Cries Mary, Little Wing, it's 2 track or 5. Some of the elements are blended to one,
and they bounce tracks down to other tracks and things like that. You kind of look at Jimi Hendrix, and now we can all kind of say, well, of course he's a visionary. It's obvious now, but at the time when he came out, I mean, he was a guy who was just playing. He was playing blues. He was backing up the Isley Brothers. He was, you know, we went on all the tours in America and the South, and he was playing. And there might have been some inkling that he was going to be good, but you know, until he actually had the opportunity to be, say, in the UK, would he have broken out in the US? Maybe not. You know, would he have become famous? Maybe. But he might have continued to be a backup, you know, kind of a, you know, his backing up somebody or whatever. So him being a visionary has a lot to do with his ability. Exactly. He built up his ability, but he also had to have the right opportunity at the right time in the right place to be able to take advantage of it. So it is interesting. When you think back on it, you think, oh, well, of course, Jimi Hendrix is a visionary, but all the things he had to do to get to that point in time and then be able to not only play and play well, but take advantage of the opportunity to actually become, you know, what he became. It's amazing.
For the people my generation, going back to your first point, which is the revolution he did for the guitar, people my age, when we learned to play, we already liked bands who had been that kind of playing and that kind of understanding of the fretboard for years. So we thought it was already normal. But that's the hard thing to do, which is put yourself in the moment when he came.
Because it was such a shock to see
exactly.
not just how he played, because he did, you know, he was an amazing player, and he had huge hands. When you look at him, whenever you look at him playing the guitar, it's like he's got this little small thing, you know, but it was his hands were so big that he was able to play the stuff that a lot of people couldn't play. So his technique had become so honed by the time he was writing his own songs that it was a different thing. He'd kind of brought everything up a notch. And then when he was able to write his own songs, it's just like, wow, come on, this is great.
But I think generally, people your age, like my dad or something, you always valued him. And maybe people like me, I valued him like maybe on the last years, over time after paying attention really. It's not just straight that you value him, but he was amazing. I mean, he was
well,
amazing.
Even the people who were around him at the time, you know, the Eric Claptons of the world, the Pete Townsends of the world, the Keith Richards, they all knew. They looked at him play and went,
they all said
it's just like this is a different thing, right? And so when you it's one thing for us to look back in history and kind of see, I mean, even if you listen to the recordings made up to the time that he appeared on the scene, it was a different guitar playing. It was
already
different.
He had it inside.
And as soon as he started playing, even that, what was the Hey Joe? I mean, Hey Joe, he played that first single, and it was just like, it was just different. You know, it was as basic as that song was, the tone that he had and the way that he played, it was miles away from even the Stones or the Who or the Beatles or the Kinks or whatever it was.
And he was, you know, the front man of that trio, but the amount of responsibility, right? Because singing that way playing that way and singing at the same time, there's very few people that.
And it was a trio, right? So
that's
it's
what
essentially,
I mean, yeah.
you know, you're not. You know, some of the bands in the '60s you could say were trios, you know, in a certain sense. But you know, he had to carry the weight. Plus, he had to do all the, you know, kind of he had the weight of the business on him as well, and that became a problem later on. But the recordings and the way he played and just. I mean, it's almost like year zero, right? It was a kind of music that was made up until that point, and then there was a different kind of music that he influenced and helped to. It wasn't just him, but he changed the game so much that people had to go, okay, wait a minute, I need to think about playing differently, or I need to up my game.
We can do better.
Correct. And so. I think in that sense, would he have called himself a visionary? Doubt it. I don't think he would have.
I've seen many interviews where he was like ashamed when the guy was giving him accolades or something. He was really ashamed.
He was a shy guy. Yeah, definitely.
You could see,
despite what he did on stage.
Well, yeah,
right, you know,
obviously.
Despite what he was doing on stage. But yeah, all the interviews that you see and all the biographies, they talk about how, in some cases, painfully shy he was. So it is interesting that dichotomy. But from a visionary standpoint, it's somebody, you know, it's got to be somebody who has pushed the boundaries of whatever the genre is that you're talking about. It might be film, it might be music, it might be art, whatever it's going to be. I think for rock music, he's definitely in there. There are others, you know, you can talk about different ones. And you might even talk about people who are instrumentally, kind of like an Eddie Van Halen or something like that. But it's a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a virtuoso versus like somebody who actually who's pushed the boundaries of the way that the genre is going to perform or whatever. So to me, he's probably the best example of that.
I was about to ask you if you have like another one more towards the songwriting skill set that you think about.
You know, the other one's Bob Dylan. I mean, there's no, from a songwriting point of view, if you look at, I was thinking about this the other day because we had a conversation earlier talking about songwriting and things like that and the evolution of it. And if you look at the period when he started out, whenever he got to New York, 63-ish, something like that, and by the time you get to within 2 years, the first songs that he's recording are these. They're usually covers. He might have one or two songs, I think, on his first record that are his. But by the time he gets to whatever, the third or the fourth record 2 years later, when you're talking about, Highway 61 and, Subterranean Blues and all that kind of stuff, it's a million miles from what those first songs he was writing is like Ode to Woody Guthrie or whatever it was, all that stuff. Folky ballads, fine in their own way. But by the time you get to like things like Visions of Joanna, it's just like this is surrealist poetry that is in a different level of anything else. People like who were fans? Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix is a massive Dylan fan. He loved him. He covered a bunch of his tunes. And he probably did the most definitive version of All Along the Watchtower that Bob Dylan, even to this day, will say that's the best cover he's of his song that he's ever had.
He wanted to apply it to his concert or something?
Well, and I think at the end of the day, if you listen to some of the recordings from Dylan later on, he was playing the version that Jimi Hendrix is playing by the end of his career, later on in his career. Now he's kind of remorphed it into different stuff. But there was a time when he was playing Jimmy's version of it, And some of the Jimmy, he changed some of the words. He would cover like a Rolling Stone and he'd change the words, it would be much more scatty and everything. But it was just, but from a songwriting point of view, Dylan gets a lot of guff for, what's the word? Not being a great musician. I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
In the sense of instrumentalist?
Correct. As a guitar player or a harmonica player or whatever it is. Everything. He was mediocre this and he was mediocre that.
But there's many more than that,
But the point was, he was focused on writing songs. Yes. That's what he was. What he needed was a conveyor of his songs. And he needed to find a melody that would work, that he could fit to some of the words that maybe he was writing. And he wasn't that concerned about, but to say that he's not, lots of people say, oh, he's not a musician or he's kind of a crap musician or whatever, at least initially, early on in his career. I think that's not fair, just generally. But from a lyric writing point of view and the ability to marry melody and his phrasing, some of his phrasing, it's almost like those old, like the Sinatra records from the 50s and 60s, and this is a really old reference, but those old crooners, those guys would sing songs. They didn't write them. They sang these songs, but they were perfectly crafted. And they would change even the syllables just to make sure that it fit.
Yes.
Dylan would do the same thing.
It's a puzzle.
Yeah, and he would look for the perfect fitting phrase or the perfect, and his songs, even when they're silly songs, even when they're kind of jokey songs or whatever, the phrasing is so good.
For whoever is wondering, phrasing, in the same amount of space in music, usually you can put any amount of words, actually.
I could put 3 words, you could put 2,
exactly.
Somebody else could put a half word.
But in many of our favorite artists, I think one of the skills they have is, out of all those possibilities, they have the skill to find a phrasing.
The right phrase, yeah.
That for the words sounds the best and everybody wants to sing afterwards.
Well, in some cases you even see it with, they'll change the pronunciation in order to get the phrasing right.
Exactly.
Now, is that the perfect thing? Probably not.
But that's vision.
But right? That, well, not even visionary, but it is a way of, it's a craft, right, that you have to build. It is something that unless you work at it. And you hear, speaking of Bob Dylan, just take him as an example. All the interviews that you see with people who talk about him writing lyrics during that period, that period when he was just writing all the time. All the biographies that talk about it, all the people that saw him during that period say he was just writing constantly. People, even like Joan Baez, she'd say, get up in the morning, he was already at the typewriter, writing stuff, just writing constantly. And a lot of it was just stream of consciousness. Yes. You'd just be writing whatever it was filter. That came to your mind. No filter, nothing. And then, when he had a tune, he'd go back through some of that stuff and go, okay, how can I construct this? And then finding the perfect phrase for the perfect line, for the perfect,
Which actually is a system.
Editing all the time, that kind of stuff.
That works from the 60s or, maybe since the beginning of music. Having
Correct.
Something that is roughly there and then enhance it, improve it, For me, what is crazy about him is the way he sings, he said to himself, that's not important, I'm gonna make it work. And that's a vision also.
Yeah.
How many artists can sing like that and be successful? It's really weird. I love the way he sings.
It's interesting.
But it's not normal.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, it's a distinctive voice. So in a certain sense, being distinctive stands out, right? In a certain way. I think if he had been somebody who wrote crappy songs and sang that way, it would have been different, right? But he wrote good songs eventually, right? Some of the first songs that he wrote were kind of like,
no, some of them I don't like.
Whatever. But by the time he got to that sort of imperial period, you think of Bob Dylan, right? Which is like kind of 64 to say 66 or so, that when anything he touched was like a great song. Blonde on Blonde, Highway 61, all that kind of stuff. Bringing It All Back Home. Those albums, there's 3 or 4 albums that are
Don't
there.
Think Twice Is Alright.
They're just, you can't touch them. They're great. And all the songs on them are, even if you don't like all of the bits of the songs, there's some great moments that are classics.
Hidden gems.
So the way that he wrote lyrics is a visionary, right? The way that he constructed that stuff. But after that, it was a bit more kind of, he had his issues and he kind of wanted to get away from fame and all that kind of stuff. So it became a different thing. But that period, it's hard to rival it as far as the literary allusions, the quality of the words, they fit into the surrealist sort of humor that was going on at the time in the 60s. It was part of the zeitgeist. It was really, he was feeding on all of it. He was just imbibing all the culture and just sort of spitting it out in lots of different ways.
A lot of things I see in my favorite artists or really famous artists is his phrasing. Tom Petty, half of his phrasing is Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Bruce Springsteen, a lot.
All those guys and Tom Petty were into. Springsteen was a big fan. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they got more than 75% of it from him.
Even Andrés Calamaro, which is maybe the biggest South American songwriter, which I always suggest to Tony to listen to. He's one of his idols.
Yeah.
He copied his his hairstyle.
He looks
phrasing.
like him. Yes, he does. Yeah.
He did an album cover just specifically to to evocate that look.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, to me, after that, it's harder to find. Those are kind of the archetypes of sort of a visionary when it comes to songwriting or just kind of where you are. You could make a case for other people, but I think those are probably the 2 best examples of it.
Yeah, and I like it because we've said one guitar player, one songwriter. So the next one would be about the role of the producer, in music history. It's like this kind of concept that sometimes is like, if you're not in music, you don't even know maybe what it is exactly, what they do. Is it important? Is it not? Is it underrated? So the question is like that. Is it an underrated role? And maybe some examples of your bands or any artist you can think about in which, the producer was key.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't have any bands that were ever successful or anything, you know, to be able to kind of take on the producer role. I think it generally depends on, I would say, let's put it this way. I would say it's underrated because most music fans have no clue about anything that happens with the producer, right? They wouldn't know unless you're really into music and want to know
Like
about the role of the producer. Absolutely. You're not even going to be aware of what they do, right? You know, you wouldn't have a clue. And it also depends on the artist and where they are in their career and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Early on in the career of people, I think, especially in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s and 90s, producers played a much bigger role, right, to my mind, in helping helping certain bands reach a vision of what they're trying to do, right? Not always. Some bands have people, and maybe you know, they have enough people that are involved with music that kind of know the role and have an idea about what they're going to try to do, and don't need as much help maybe as some other bands. But some bands are going to need it, especially younger bands early on, because they don't know what they don't know, right?
Exactly.
And until they see what somebody might bring to the table in that instance, you know, they don't really get it. The perfect example of something like that is going to be George Martin. We had this conversation the other night.
Yes.
You know, as good as the Beatles were,
Yes.
and as good as what they were doing was at that time, they still needed somebody to be able in the studio to say, you know what, guys, let's try it this way, or let's do it, you know, or let's do this, or, you know, whatever it might be. Now, certainly by maybe, I don't know, the second or third album, everybody in the band was probably going, no, okay, I kind of know, we know how to do this now.
Their
you know,
filters maybe.
So they're starting to
improved.
push back a little bit because they've got ideas, and the more that they do it and the more experience you have, then you feel comfortable being able to say, no, we're not going, no, I don't agree with you, we're going to do it some other way. But certainly at the beginning, I would bet that there was a lot of input from him that was, let's try it. Yeah, that doesn't sound great. Let's try it a little bit differently. Can we change a key here, or whatever it might be? I don't think it was major, but I think it was enough to, you know, suggest to the guys, hey, we should try to do something differently. As you go along in music history, certainly at the beginning, you have all these guys. There's the Phil Spectors of the world. There's the Shel Talmys of the world in the UK. He was an American guy, but he did a bunch of the Kinks records and the Who and everybody else. Lots of other people who were quite instrumental because, and this is actually on a different, you know, kind of conversation, but they were instrumental in a lot of those things because they were so connected to the music industry that the record companies would hire the producer and not necessarily the band, right?
Yes.
And so they had a huge, an oversized influence on a lot of those bands. And in fact, a lot of those bands got into legal fights with those guys because the bands would get to a certain point and we're like, well, we don't want to do it this way. And he said, you have to do it this way or we're not putting the record out, right?
So they had you like against the wall somehow.
So in certain instances they had you over a barrel because they were the ones in charge, right? Yeah, as opposed to the band. Now for the Beatles, in certain senses, they were so big that they could kind of throw the weight around a little bit. And later on, when you got to a point in the 60s when there were a lot of good bands, the Stones, for example, and all the, you know, Jimi Hendrix and the Who and the Kinks and all those by the 60s, it was becoming more focused on the artist and not so much on the producer. And that, I think that would come and go in cycles. But there were always famous producers that are out there that people always want to work with because they did records that were popular or there were records that people thought sounded good.
Which is a tricky topic because many times, you know, if the song came in perfect, maybe you took care of the technical stuff, maybe a couple of general suggestions.
Yeah.
But your lack, maybe in that case, was the fact of being in that place, and the songs came to you. You know, especially the greatest songs. I don't think. Well, it's a tricky topic. I don't think the producer did them. I think maybe he brought them to the next level, but I think the artists, the bigger ones and the ones that had stood the test of time, were the ones to, to bring the bones, the important parts.
Well, the
of
artist
song.
is always going to say that they were the one who wrote the song,
Uh-huh.
and it wasn't the producer, right?
Exactly.
Now they may give credit to the producer, right, in a lot of different ways. Like the great example of this is like Jimmy Iovine working on Damn the Torpedoes with Tom Petty,
Yes.
right? And there's that great interview where he goes when they figure out that they can do the shaker on one of the songs, and it was perfect for the song. But before that, the song was kind of like,
Yes.
everybody's kind of like, what's wrong? Why isn't it doing what it's doing? And of course, Tom Petty's going to say, well, I wrote the song.
Yes.
Jimmy Iovine said, well, yeah, but I put the shaker on, whatever, and that made the song or whatever it was. But the point is, it's got to be both.
Yes.
It has to be both. You've got to have the bed of the song. You've got to have something to work with, right? For them to go, okay, that we can do something with. We've got the basis for it. I hear it. Now we just need to make it the best version of that song that we can do, and that might require a little tweaking. And in fact, in some cases, it might require tearing it all down and putting it back together again.
I think in general,
But
the most, the two things that I see the most is, out of all the options in all the elements, which is the right part for that vocal and that lyric. That is one.
yeah,
Which 99% of the people, if you were not involved in production at some point, you don't even pay attention to that. So you're not gonna know what's in every bar, what's best for the song. But if it's put in front of you, I'm sure you have the feeling. The artist has the feeling of that's better, that's worse.
well, there.
But that filter role, that's the first one, I would say, out of the options.
Agreed.
And then the second, as you were saying, is this is great. And if you do a little bit of that it's going to be greater, but you don't know yet.
Right.
The person in the room that came with the song maybe doesn't know yet. And after that, I think you start to wonder about everything you come up with, and you start to second guess it, but in a good way.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
maybe, let's see.
It's like, I like this part, but could it be better? Is there something we could do to make it a little better? One of the interesting things I always you'll hear bands talk about producers or whatever, and sometimes bands will get in a place where they're trying to do it on their own, right?
Yes.
They think they can,
Yes.
and then they get to a point and they just realize,
Yes.
we can't finish this, right? We're not. It doesn't sound the way we want it to sound. We think the songs are better than this, and in those instances, it's really important to have somebody to be able to step in to go, okay, kind of a fresh set of ears to just say, here's the good stuff. Here, let's focus on this. Here's the stuff we can get rid of. Let's try to trim this down, or these are too long. Let's cut it, et
This
cetera,
is
et cetera.
key, and if we get rid of this, there's no song, for example.
So
which I've seen many times getting rid of the important stuff,
The other thing that's crazy about songs is we might sit here and analyze a song and go, oh my God, that's the perfect melody. Oh my God, that's the perfect part. But you know as well as I do that there could be 5 or 6 different perfect parts for that part.
Yeah.
Right? Regardless.
Also, because
unless you try the other ones, right, you don't know.
When you hear a band live, it's not the recording, and it works anyway. And
well,
it's
no,
not
I guess what I
exactly
mean
the same.
I guess what I mean is a slightly different thing. Like if you find what we would term the perfect phrase in a song, right? It's perfectly phrased and everything else. You could probably find another phrase, phrase it correctly, another word and phrase it correctly, and it would still work.
The impact would be the same.
Is that good or is that bad? We don't know what could have been in the song because it was never used or never thought of or whatever else. But I bet you could find 5 or 6 other perfectly usable things that would be as good.
Talking about that, there's a really funny version of the song, one of the songs by the Backstreet Boys, the I Want It My Way, I think the most important, famous one, with a different kind of lyrics, different words. It's the same melody, same phrasing, maybe different vowels, I don't know. But changing, it's like more poetic, more well done maybe lyrics, and it doesn't work. The song, it doesn't work, not even as half as it does.
Sometimes that'll happen, right? But like because it's written, what we think is perfect doesn't mean that it couldn't have been written
No, yeah.
a different way, right?
That's
yeah.
Maybe an extreme example, but
It's like counterfactual history or something. If somebody else had won World War II or
Yes.
whatever, that kind of thing. You never know because that's not going to happen.
but what I mean is,
But
if at that level of a song, which is maybe in the 90s, 2000s, one of the greatest hits, they were doubting. Everybody doubts.
Sure.
How many versions of the Beatles with, outtakes that didn't make it through of, Gotta Get You Into My Life, which is really a really hard song.
Right.
Really hard. And they had to do it like 6-7 times.
Yeah, well, some of them even more.
Or more. Yeah, many more.
Yeah.
20 sometimes, 28, whatever. But the lesson to me is that pretty often the final version in the Beatles albums, you listen to them side by side, and I think it's better.
It is hard.
It's better.
It is hard sometimes, though, to a song that you've heard for a million years on the radio, right? It's famous. It could be a Beatles song. Got to Get You Into My Life. Let's take that as an example. You brought it up, right? I really like that song. Always have since first time I heard it. When I heard that first little, that horn blast in it, immediately I was like, oh, this is a good song. Even when I was a kid, when I first heard it. But when you hear it so often, hearing it differently, it's sometimes hard to go, oh, could this have been better or whatever. It probably could have in some way, shape, or form. But because it's so embedded in your memory.
And you only saw that version.
Correct.
You were not doubting about the ones before, right?
And you didn't make it, right?
Exactly.
For them, it's one thing, Paul McCartney probably wrote it, most of it anyway. I bet to this day he probably, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I'd changed that on something or whatever it was. But we'd go, it's perfect. It sounds really good, whatever. So we don't have, if you're not in the room doing it, you don't have the perspective to say, well, they should have done it. I mean, you can say whether you like a song or not, and that's a slightly different thing. But in the craft of the songwriting, it's sometimes difficult. I mean, so this is a perfect, this is a very simple example, but song we were working on the other day.
Yes.
I found myself, as I was going around the house today, just kind of singing it, not thinking about it, right? And I thought to myself, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because it could be a good thing in that it's like...
Catchy.
It's catchy enough that I'm kind of remembering it and thinking, oh, well, this is good. But it also could be just because we've been playing it so much that it's embedded in my head and I can't really think about it in a different way, right? And so there's the plus and the minus to that.
If that happens, in the second point of view that you said, then if it sticks too much in a bad way, if we end up changing that part, it's really hard for the people involved sometimes to be able to.
It's like, what are you doing, throwing all those good parts away?
That was the good one,
So it's about the perspective, I think, and this takes you back to the original question. How important is the producer? I think for some bands, in some situations, it's super important.
Yes.
I think for like those boy bands in the 80s or whatever, is probably the most important thing, right?
Oh yes.
Other bands at other parts of their career, probably not so much.
You too, maybe at some points, and others no.
Well, once you get to a certain point as a band, and I say like the Rolling Stones, and I'm not talking about the Rolling Stones now, but they could make a record tomorrow, and it would sound good because they all know how to produce. You know what I mean? They've been around enough to be able to go, we know what we're doing.
The thing is, an album like The Joshua Tree or Acton Baby, without at least one person outside of the band, to me it's absolutely impossible.
Well, they're an interesting case because they sought out people, right? They went to, what's his name? The guy who was in Roxy Music.
Daniel Lanois?
Well, him, but the other guy who they worked with on...
and Brian Eno?
Brian Eno is the one I'm thinking of, yeah. They sought him out for The Unforgettable Fire, got him involved. They sought out Flood for, a couple of those other later records. The Abomination That Is Pop, but I'll leave that to the side.
Yeah.
But he was involved before that as well. He was involved in Knock Tongue Baby, if I remember correctly. But they always went looking for that. Other bands won't go maybe that far, but they still are looking for people that they want to work with. And usually that's the case. When a band gets to a point where they have enough clout and enough money to be able to say, I want to work with whoever, John Paul Jones, right, from Led Zeppelin or something like that. Then you're kind of searching for something that they can give you, like something that they can bring to the party that you don't have, right?
Absolutely.
And so, or maybe that you think that you don't have. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right?
And sometimes, you, as you say, you think you don't have it, but he's just there to say, no, you have it. Don't doubt it.
Right. To act as
going.
to act as a cheerleader in a sense, to to kind of support them. But in some cases you hear stories about other situations where the producer's doing everything, and that's a different set of circumstances. So.
That is the the line that divides maybe the artist and people that for some reason ended up being in a position of a pop star, rock star,
right,
but maybe they are not as involved.
Well, okay. I think so. To come back to the question, it depends. I think
it's a really difficult one to.
Yep. It depends on the band. It depends on where they are in their career. It depends on a whole host of factors. And in some cases, it's going to be super important, and in other cases, less so.
But
right?
In general, outside point of view, filter, cheerleading.
Yeah.
Yep.
And in some cases, musical input, right? In some cases, definitely literal musical input.
Some
right?
can play really well also. Okay. What else? So about your personal or my personal experience on the recording process, especially. What is it that you like especially, or that you really dislike in particular, maybe?
I don't dislike any of the parts. I've been pleasantly surprised, to be honest, because let's be fair. I'm not, it's not like I've done a ton of recording, but I've done enough to kind of know that I thought that I would have much more trouble singing and getting the parts right than I have. I also thought that it was going to be much more difficult and more laborious for me to put guitar tracks down. And I've never had too much trouble. Now, I don't play lead guitar in any way, shape, or form. I can play some riffs and things, but that's it. But me just playing the guitar, I always was worried that I would have not enough. I just wouldn't have the chops to do it, or the singing voice to do it. And I've been pleasantly surprised to find out that I can generally do it. Now, whether I'm a virtuoso, that's, and people want to listen to me, that's a different set of circumstances. But I've always been surprised at how much I've enjoyed being in the studio. I enjoyed the process of trying to figure out what to add and what to take away, the kind of puzzle part of it, to try to see what will fit together. The phrasing of these things, moving words around, or moving choruses around, or chopping off part of the chorus, or whatever it might be. I enjoy that aspect of it. It can be long and a little bit tedious at times, sometimes, depending on how you're working and who you're working with, right? So with you, I mean, we've been able to work, fortunately, quite quickly. So we've never really had too many issues with getting stuck on a part that we can't solve, or not being able to think our way out of a problem that we've gotten. And we always pretty much have complementary ideas about it, and that is helpful, right? Because if you've got somebody that you're butting heads with all the time, you hear some of these stories. The classic story that I always remember is the band. There's a British band from the 80s called XTC, and they were massive fans of Todd Rundgren. Right, so they wanted to work with him. They were like, they sought him out and they wanted to work with him because they thought, oh, he'll be great for us and whatever. And he and the lead singer in the band, Andy Partridge, just famously did not get along. They were like, butting heads the whole time, and they were really kind of, it was not a pleasant experience. They made a really great, to my mind, record that had one of their biggest hits in the U.S. called "Dear God," but it was a bit of an anomaly, and there was so much tension in the studio that it became almost unbearable for them to work together. That's the extreme. That's the one end of the extreme, right? But the other way is, if you're feeling like you trust the person that you're working with, because it's hard in a creative medium to sort of give something that you've put together over to somebody else, have them critically pick it apart, and then go, okay, fine, we'll do it, that way. You've got to trust the person, you've got to trust the process, but you also have to have input. You need to put your ideas in and things like that. But when you can do that, and it actually is collaborative, it's fun.
I think for that,
it's a fun way to work.
For that to work, if you don't have this sense, I wouldn't say immediately, but after a few minutes, that whatever you were stuck in, it's being solved, like almost undeniably for the better. Like you're like, oh, that problem is not there anymore. Clearly.
Yeah.
If that keeps
we've plugged that hole, or whatever it was.
If that keeps happening, that's where I think trust is starting to be built.
Yeah.
Because then, as we were saying, in the same sense of as trauma creates you anticipation for the future, that's like the opposite.
Yeah.
We've been there. We know we can solve it.
Well, I think, the other thing that's important about it, we've talked about this. I think the arranging part of it, having the song, getting it down to a point where everybody's comfortable with the arrangement. Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of knows what the structure of the song is going to be. That doesn't mean that you can't do a little improvising in the sense of adding things or bits and parts and, maybe expanding something or whatever it is. But getting to a point where everybody's sort of comfortable with the structure of the song, I think, at least from my way of working, it fits better. Yeah. I'm not sure. Maybe at some point down the line, who knows, that I could be in a band where you just go in the studio and say, well, we don't have anything. Let's just jam around and see. We'll keep recording stuff until something happens. Right? Plenty of bands do that.
Yes.
Right?
You too.
Plenty of bands do it. They'll just go in and kind of wing it and see how it goes. And then, but certainly where I am and the kind of songs that I'm writing and all that kind of stuff, it wouldn't make sense. Now, having said that, we've got this freak out at the end of this next song that we're working on anyway that, it kind of approximates something like that. But I would not want to go in, if I was a band, right, and I was looking to cut an album, I wouldn't want to walk into a studio with nothing written.
Yes.
And no arrangement settled and, whatever. It'd be way too nerve-wracking.
Our system, I think, maybe out of luck also, we agree in almost anything. But since the first conversation, my thought was, if I have somebody in the room that his references are Dylan, the Stones, Tom Petty, whatever, a lot of bands that I like also, we cannot do the kind of production that nowadays is like this. Okay, let me put some samples on and see what happens. I have a lot of samples and plugins. I love them.
Yeah.
But the inception of everything is taste. We're not going to reach the taste that we have in our heads with that system.
Yeah.
So our system is, we jam it. Tony usually brings it. We almost, like, telepathically, we agree in the spots that the problems are. But until we don't have a demo on our phones, from top to bottom, that it works, I think it's almost we're not comfortable.
It's tough. It's one way of working. I mean, there's plenty of bands out there who'll go in and jam around. They might have ideas, right? I'm kind of stating as extreme. They have nothing. I don't think many bands walk into the studio with absolutely nothing. But nowadays, with the setups that people have, this might be a good segue into one of your other questions. The setups that people have, you don't necessarily need, and most of the people, or a lot of the people, a lot of bands that I know about now these days, they've got a place where they have at least some rudimentary recording equipment. It might be computer, it might just be some plugins, whatever it might be, that they can make music at any time in any place. And so the jamming aspect of that, just going in and recording some ideas so that you can then develop those into songs later on, that makes sense to me, right? If you're using it as a writing device, right, the studio as a way to come up with some ideas that you can then condense into some other stuff and then come up with that song, then that makes sense to me. But going in and saying, I'm going to go record a record in 2 weeks and I have nothing and I'm just going to walk in the studio and start recording, seems a bit crazy to me.
The amount of, bringing songs to live as the ultimate version, which is what we all try. Maybe down the line you record another version, which maybe we did with Heavy Heart, for example. But it brings so much doubting and options and, you know, stress, lack of trust or trust. So many decisions that if on top of that you don't know what you're gonna do,
Right.
it makes it like, you know, for
10
me
times harder.
Exactly, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
And painful because imagine, usually we have more than 50% of the song. Right?
Generally, I think that's right.
Or a little more, 60
Or at least,
maybe.
yeah, it's a big chunk of the idea.
So
at
imagine,
least. Right.
okay, let's lay it down. Let's record it. But then it goes nowhere. But you did all the process. To me, that's, you know, that's super painful, frustrating.
of course.
You know, time, effort.
Well, I've to be honest, I've been a little bit surprised at how little I've always kind of thought, you know, maybe it's not the best idea to lay an entire rhythm track out.
Yeah.
Because what if you need to change something? You know,
Yeah.
what if you need to, like, what if you go, that middle eight or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, you can always record it again. But that can be after you've layered on a bunch of stuff and made a lot of effort to kind of make it work, and then it doesn't work. You know, it's definitely painful, but sometimes I think you probably have to kind of you know, I'm sure you've been in this position with people when you're trying to record something, and you realize suddenly that this just is not going to work.
And I absolutely get it, but the thing is, you know, at least the general stuff, structure, transitions,
Right.
chords,
Yeah.
phrasing from top to bottom, I think that's almost mandatory in our style.
Yeah.
Then the part maybe can variate. You can record it,
Right.
whatever.
Well,
But you know, the bones and the general feeling, the rhythm accents, all that, to me it's like, if you get rid of that.
no, I agree. I mean, I think I would rather work. I think the way that we've ended up working is the way that I think is, at least from the way that I like to make music is the best way to do it. Because otherwise, there's too much kind of, doubt's not the right word, but it's just like a sort of, you don't have enough to hang on the song.
Yes.
You know, to have the song that you can then develop or whatever.
And an example of that, of the variation in the parts, I remember one of the songs, one of the first ones. You don't even notice, but Tony was recording the acoustic, top to bottom. If we can do parts top to bottom. And in the middle, I was like, he's not playing the first one as the second one. And it was recording. And I was almost with my hand about to say, stop it, but I left it, right? And it made it.
It was
in
better,
the final,
yeah.
in the final version. It was like, instead of so rhythmically, the same chords, more like in an arpeggio style.
Right.
I didn't say anything.
And I probably didn't even think about it. I was just playing.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
But then afterwards, I said to myself, that's a lesson for me.
Right.
For me to say, he's in the journey.
Right.
He's in the journey of, maybe I'm feeling that after that part being one way, the second time it shows up, it should be slightly different. So let's see if it happens.
Well, that's another,
cutting it.
No, I agree. That's another, you know, I think probably surprising thing about the studio as well is that there, you know, I wouldn't say many times, but there's definitely, I think in every song that we've actually recorded, there's always been a moment where it's like, oh, wow, how did that happen?
Yes.
You know, it's like, oh, I wouldn't have thought we were going to do that, but that worked.
Exactly.
Or here's a sound, you know, the kind of weird traffic sound that we ended up putting.
Yes.
That was like, that sounds like an overdriven organ or whatever it was. You know, we were just sitting there and I was like, oh, we should put that at the beginning of the song. And it was like,
yes,
wait a minute. And then tried it and was
Does
like,
it
oh,
work?
yeah,
Yes.
hang on, that would work. So, yeah, every song has had a little bit that you kind of like, I never would have guessed that would have happened.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And that's also part of the, you know, kind of, you know, the good part of recording is it's like those happy accidents that, you know, go.
And again, that, for example, that happy accident is a matter of, okay, put your instincts on the project. Then if it doesn't work, maybe it doesn't work there, but we put it on the pre-intro at the beginning of everything, and maybe that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's I've been more pleasantly surprised
Then
than poorly surprised, if I can put it that way. Yeah, definitely. I haven't really, the stuff that I worried about. Oh, as Tom Petty likes to say, the stuff that I worried about usually never happens.
oh yeah, I
right?
like that one.
So yeah, so there you go.
That's on what song is that one?
He's got it on a couple. He actually has that sentiment, I think, on a couple of songs. There was a recent one on his. I think on the last album there was something like, but there's a song where he actually says that at some point. I can't
It's on
remember
the
what it is.
Wildflowers album. It's
Yeah, I think there is one. There's one version of it. I think his last
happens.
album has a similar sort of sentiment. But yeah,
Crawling Back to You. It's,
yeah, yeah. That's it. That's it.
Uh-huh.
Yep, crawling back to you. That's right.
So, how do you know, if you know, when to bring something to somebody, or when it is better to solve it yourself? It's like a matter of, when you're in a room with other people dealing with opinions, trust, as we were saying. Well, actually we have been maybe half answering this question, but I don't know. How do you know when it's better to bring it to somebody or not?
Well, I'm not certainly not a trained musician in any way, shape, or form. Right? The stuff that I do musically is all from being a fan of music, wanting to play guitar, but never really studying it in any way, shape, or form seriously, or even music theory. I've got a pretty basic understanding of like chord structures and progressions and various keys and things like that, but I am not classically trained by any stretch of the imagination. So that question to me is probably not the right question in a certain sense, because I can usually get an idea across of a chord structure or a riff or whatever it might be, but I'm usually going to need help to get it to a point regardless of where it could be recorded as a song. Sometimes I've had a couple things that I've been able to kind of develop out, and they just worked as the way that I developed them, right? And I continue to this day to play them. But interestingly, Heavy Heart is a song that we used to play in a certain vein, and we've changed it slightly.
Yes.
So the structure is 95% the same, but the rhythm and the way it's kind of sung is a little bit different.
Yes.
So when to bring something to somebody, I would say for me, it's most of the time.
Or, where is the moments maybe that make you doubt the most? But I let you finish. Sorry.
Well, no, I think it's not that I doubt per se. It's that I kind of like, I'll have an idea. It's there. I'm pretty sure that it is the kernel of a song, but where to take it to make it not sound like a million other songs, right, is a different question. And I sometimes struggle to get that to happen. I would say more than sometimes. It's probably most of the time, right? So working with you has been good because you can go, okay, I like this part. I think there's something here that we could work on, but let's think about how we might be able to change. And through that conversation, either you'll have an idea or it'll spur me to have another idea that I wouldn't have thought of, without having that conversation, right? So I think in most instances, for me, it's necessary to have a bit of stimulus, because I've got my phone over there, must have 1,000 bits and pieces of stuff that I could pull out at any one moment in time. Half of it will be crap, right? But I bet there's another 200 or 300 things in there that I could conceivably pull out and go, I bet we could get a song out of here, right? And so, but it would never get any further generally than what's there unless I had some way to go, some sort of foil to bounce off of to figure out. So for me, it's really important to have somebody like you to be able to go, what do you think of this? Yeah, I like it. How can we make it better? If you did this, okay, and then let's do that, and then let's put this over here, and then it becomes something different. So, but for other people, you hear these stories. There's lots of bands where they've got the main songwriter will put together a demo. Essentially, the demo, the guy's so good that he plays all the instruments, right? the guys are good players in the rest of the band, but there's not much for them to do because he's kind of given them what he wants to hear. Is there room for them to kind of make it their own? Maybe, yes, maybe no, right? And it's like, and that process works, right? If everybody's okay with that. To me, that would be difficult to work with.
Yes.
I couldn't do it that way. Because then it's like, you might as well just have that person be the solo artist and then, let them do what they want to do. If you're going to have a band, to me, and we've had this conversation, bands to me need to be sort of democratic entities, at least in my mind.
Yeah.
You need to have people who are all in.
Yeah.
You need to have people who are going to contribute at the level that everybody else is going to contribute. And it might not necessarily always be musical, right? It could be...
Unlocking situations.
Well, that... Or it could even be just like, okay, this guy's going to deal with all the business side of it, or this guy's going to deal with this,
roles.
or whatever. You've got roles in the band, and they might be musical ones, they might be other things, but you as a band, appreciate that role and the way that person's playing. In the perfect world, you'd have 4 people who can play multiple instruments, who can contribute on all levels to everything else.
They can ride the same level of songs.
But how many times is that going to happen?
Exactly.
But even having somebody step in, I'm sure, this is not to deride Larry Mullen Jr. I'm sure he's a great player, right? But I bet there are times when he's stepped in and said, I don't like that part.
Yeah.
Get rid of it. Yeah. You'd be better if we played it this way. And it makes a song better. Even that one little bit, right? He might not know how to play guitar. I don't know Larry Mullen, right? But he can hear, and he's played long enough to know that he's like, let's do this a little bit differently. And I'm sure at some point in the band, he's done that.
And that is when trust comes in, right?
Correct.
If you don't have it.
Well, and that's why bands break up.
There's no sense of being together.
Correct. That's why bands break up. That's why you have situations where they start squabbling over who's done what, and who should get money, and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, it's hard enough to make music if you don't have all that stuff going on.
Yes.
So, if you're going to put yourself in a position with people that you like and are friends and, whatever. And
going back to one of the moments of your answer, for me, as a songwriter, well, you have listened to a lot of my songs, but understanding that in the way that I like to make songs, that the root of all the problems is in the inception of the song, is like in the pre-production or in the songwriting stage. It's never after.
Because if you don't have something to work with, it's not going to work.
That was one of the biggest jumps. And then being able to say, okay, I've been writing songs for years, but I don't know still if after this section, this is the ultimate part that can come. So today, I'm not ready to write the chorus.
Right.
Maybe that's one chorus, but tomorrow I'm gonna write another one.
Yeah.
And being able, 1 or 2 or 3, or when it, until it's okay. The level of, lack of ego that it takes, lack of, I don't know, whatever. Not worrying about how painful it is, or not looking to the songs for the effort instead of what they are actually.
Right.
It was hard to me to write, but that doesn't matter if the song is not good enough.
Right.
Well, that's the hardest one for me.
The other thing that I think that brings up is the kind of stress of like, I love this verse, but the chorus is not good enough. It needs a better chorus.
Yes.
Or I've got a great chorus, it needs better verses.
That's super hard.
Whatever. And that creates a lot of stress. One of the other things that I've been quite surprised with, you're talking about things that are surprising in the studio. One of the things that I always wanted to try to do, we were talking about this yesterday, was I always tried to get the perfect words before I was finished. I wanted to finish the song, right?
Yes.
And get the words, maybe not the perfect words, but at least the words that I was comfortable with, and the phrasing and everything else, right? And I've learned in doing even just the last couple of months that it's okay to not have the part. I kind of have generally the melody, and I found that it used to stress me out if I didn't have it to go in. I wanted to make sure that I had something to be able to kind of sing or whatever it was. But now the way I feel about it is, I'm a lot less stressed about it. And usually when I can step away from it for a little while, go take a walk, whatever, the part will come to me. It'll just, the word will
No,
come or whatever
I
it will be.
I love that because in anything that I've been, I used to have those, pointless rules like I want to have all the words before I record. I want to have all the parts before I'm never gonna record the part with free tempo. I'm never gonna be. Vocals go always last.
Yep.
Acoustic guitar in our sessions will go always first. Any of that, 95% of the times, at some point it doesn't apply.
Right.
And it comes from, past experiences of a situation of stress in which you were like, "Oof, usually if I don't have this laid down, it's not going to work." But when you develop a system, like I think we did, at least for our music, I don't think we don't have any stress. Almost,
I think
for any element.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and I was just thinking about this, right? I would, just to follow up on what I was saying just a minute ago, I think every song that we've recorded, I've changed the words to, right? And I might have even changed them 2 seconds before I've sung them, because in my mind I can go, oh, wait a minute, the phrase will be better if I do this, or drop this word and put it, or change the word slightly or whatever. But stress, I think, it's one type of stress when you're pressing yourself internally to do something. It's another type of stress. Those bands in the 70s and 80s when they were paying $1,000 an hour to come up with something, and everybody's sitting there twiddling their thumbs going, when are you going to come up with that word? That kind of thing.
We are getting...
That's a different level of stress. I mean, we don't really have any stress, to be honest.
Not in that level, obviously.
No.
Well, if I was one of those guys that I could bring it, the stress, but I'm never going to do it. I don't think...
Well, it won't help. It doesn't help you.
Music... Right? And I've listened to Eric Valentine, one of the greatest producers ever. A guy of that level saying, if time is what defines our, our schedule of, we gotta finish it, regardless of the quality. What's the point?
Yeah, no, indeed. Well, I mean, and that goes back, I think there's a lot less stress that way. And again, it goes to another question that you're going to ask here in a minute.
We can jump straight in.
Well, the way that people have recording setups these days, you don't necessarily, you don't have to be in a studio, right? A lot of those times back in the 70s and 80s, the way that they had tour structured and everything else, you had to finish the album so you could get it mastered and send out before the tour starts in order to do this, and that, and that's just crazy.
Exactly.
The way that they did schedules back in the day. Now, for some people need deadlines, right? People work differently, right? Some people need to be pushed.
I think at some point, everybody.
Correct, in a certain sense.
At some point.
But, nowadays, there's no excuse to be in that situation, right? The way that you can record things, the ease with which you can do a lot of the stuff that it would take, days, hours, weeks to do back in the past, including all the money and everything else. I mean, you've got to have a decent setup. Let's face it. You got to have the base. You got to have some basics.
Yes.
But for a fraction.
Yes. Of
the money that was bandied about back in the day, you can get a recording that sounds as good in many respects as some of those things would sound. So, the stress that's induced by, and I don't think it's really there anymore. I mean, the labels that exist, they're not really labels in the way that they were back in the 70s and 80s or 60s or whatever it was. You're not getting money from, all they're doing is distributing the stuff that you're making, right? And you're kind of in a partnership with some of the record companies to be able to do it at this point. Whereas before it was like you were going into debt to the record company that you would never be able to get out of. And you'd continue to go into this rabbit hole of, well, we need to make more albums to make more money in order to be able to tour, to be able to make more albums, etc., etc.
But I bring the stress factor and the not relaxed feeling, because when I've seen documentaries of my favorite bands in the studio, which always are my favorite, because I think there's no more real moment than being in the studio. They have always been, I've never seen them worried, or I'm sure there was moments, but I think that comes from being with a team of people that you know it's gonna work, you know. But when I was starting, when you do it yourself, I was more stressed than relaxed, and
Sure.
and
Yeah.
it was lack of experience, lack
Well,
of knowledge,
of
and it was
course.
like that for 7 or 8 years, you know.
Of course. I mean, you know, the perfect example of this, you know, the stress-inducing bits of bands is like, you know, go see that Wilco documentary. I can't remember what it's called. It was them making the Yankee, what is it, Foxtrail Yankee Foxtrot or whatever it was. Hotel Yankee Foxtrot, that's what it's called, the album. And essentially, I mean, the long and short of it is they were dropped by their label, right? They were making an album. It wasn't going well, right? They were literally picking apart songs, you know, and kind of reinventing them in many very cool ways, ultimately. But the whole band was falling apart. One of the guys was going to end up leaving. They were going to kick him out of the band because it becomes so stressful. All of that, the record company had dropped them. Then one of their subsidiaries bought the record back. You know, it was all this drama that was going on. And literally, you know, Jeff Tweedy's having migraines. He's throwing up in the studio. This is all on camera, right? This is all on camera. And that's the kind of stress that was being, you know, because of all the drama that was swirling around. Now, think to yourself, okay, how am I going to make music like that?
Yes.
Right? In those sort of circumstances. And they made one of the best albums of their career, you know. So, now, is that part of it? Probably. There's part of it led to some of the goodness of that record.
I'm sure it wasn't the first one.
Could
right?
they have made it as good a record without some of that drama? Probably. You know, but you know, maybe not.
Yeah.
And that's again that counterfactual thing is like, did it take all of that to make that good record, or could they have made that record without all that drama? And that is the ultimate question, right?
Example perfect of that is "Be Here Now" by Oasis.
Right.
Many times, you know, Noel has said there was nobody.
Don't get me started on "Be Here Now."
No, but and we jumped to the last one. But there was nobody around us because we were the biggest band in the world. We
didn't have a producer
telling
us to say, "Hey, cut off that ending of the song. It's 7 minutes. Cut it to 5."
1 is 9.
Yeah.
We did definitely maybe Morning Glory. We were generating millions of profit for the label, so we thought nobody is more right than us. And you know, years later, I still think there's
good
unbelievable
songs in there.
songs there. Maybe half of it is amazing.
Yeah, there's a couple good songs in there. The only problem is that all of those songs go to be like 7 minutes long.
Yeah,
or whatever.
I will. But again, nobody out of the band saying, "Hey, maybe you should." The same song should be recorded, but maybe in a year from now.
I'll tell you what. I bet at that point in time, certainly in their career, even if they'd had a producer in there that said, "Hey," they would have been like, "Screw you."
I know, exactly. I'm sure.
Like, I'm not listening to you.
Absolutely sure. Yeah.
We know what the hell we're doing. You know, screw you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And well, we have been answering this one also, but will studios eventually disappear? I think, yes, they are, and again, you have to have a decent setup, and it's like a weapon of two, you know.
Well, let's face it.
How do you say it in English? A weapon of two. It can end up really good or really bad.
Yeah. You've got two extremes.
Two extremes.
For that. Let's face it. You don't need to be in a studio to record.
Yes.
There's no question about it.
That's the first one, the most important one.
You get a decent room with some decent microphones, with somebody who has a reasonable idea of where to place them to get some good sounds. You're going to be able to make music, right? How different would it be if you were set up in Hansa Studios in Berlin, or whatever? Probably there's going to be a difference, but it's not so much, especially when everybody listens to music on one of the phones.
And especially
you're never going to hear the difference.
When you still don't know how to write songs properly.
Correct.
You don't have the experience.
Yeah.
I think it's a million times better to level up your experience at your house.
Yeah.
And then at some point
transfer over if you want to do it, if you've got the money or whatever.
Place, maybe.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think studios will ever completely die, but they're definitely going to be fewer and fewer. Yeah. Right?
I'm sure, because it's undeniable the difference of quality in sound when the room is treated.
Yeah.
That is the main, especially for drums and vocals, which are the two main elements.
Yep.
Which you can still do.
Yep.
We do it here. We do it in my bedroom.
It's crazy.
But this room, Actually,
I think this room is good.
and for being a house, it's a luxury because it's, like pretty long,
Yeah.
big. It has furniture.
A little bit of natural reverb
exactly.
in it.
It's not a bedroom. It's the living room.
Yeah.
But anyway, a treated room and maybe some gear, maybe some tape stuff, maybe some preamps. I never had the luxury of trying that gear, but if the greatest names that I admire, they are still using it. The key is, the source.
Yeah, I mean, you still got to, ultimately, to make music, you're going to have the songs. And how they're recorded will be an evolving thing going forward. I do, I'm definitely the old grandpa shouting into the wind about, we had this conversation the other day. It's just like, to me, all the music that you hear nowadays just sounds all the same.
Yeah.
90%. There's no kind of variation to it. There's some people out there who are doing good stuff, no question about it, and there are bands that are still doing some creative things, whatever. But the stuff that you just generally hear is just it's all the same. It's made by the same people. It's produced by the same people. It's mixed by the same people.
Same system and process, which
Correct.
affects directly on the end result, like immediately.
Yep.
To me, I'm gonna be the old grandpa again, but that system of I have everything, but I use it like, let's see what happens on the computer. You're getting rid of so many things.
Yeah.
But I think I have to be honest. Many times I'm not prepared, but I want to pretend to that maybe something can happen. But I don't know. Many great songs have been done that way. I don't want to be hating on anybody. But what I'm sure is you're getting rid of a lot of things, happy accidents, developing full sections in a different way. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there is a beauty to having a group of people in a room, and we don't record this way, right? We haven't been recording this way. We don't really have a drummer. I don't have a drummer at the moment who can do it. So you've been programming stuff and everything else.
But we do the pre-production stuff.
But there is a beauty to having 4 people, 5 people, whatever it is, in a room, playing with one another, playing off of one another, not playing to a click track,
exactly.
Speeding up sometimes, and that's okay. That's what rock and roll is all about, So there is a beauty to that, and that's something I think that's probably a bit lost at the moment. Maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. We'll see. But
one of my favorite artists, Phineas and Billie Eilish, they are on the opposite, absolute extreme of what we do.
Yep.
And they invented a sound which is wonderful, and the world, I think, never saw before. And I love them. I love them, and it was done in a super different way.
Yeah.
How often does it happen? Again, we always say this. Not a lot of people can do it.
Yep. Agreed. Yep.
Okay. So
are we done with our questions?
I think that's it. We're gonna do the fast ones.
Okay.
Later, but we're gonna
rapid fire.
Yeah,
okay.
We're gonna do those ones in a.
I was listening.
There's many ways for the game to be played. Angles taken, others turned away. But you can't make all your life disappear while the counters counted down this strive. Met this girl down Mexico way. We had her run and then we said good day. I might have seen her